Hello, Layla. Welcome to the Female Power of the Blues in Radio Cultura. I am very happy to have you today with us and to talk to you about your music and your life. You have a very rich and wonderful career, 15 albums, many collaborations, and many years of amazing stage performances around the world. What a deep and strong voice you have. Were you born this way? With this unusual deep voice? Or did it came with time at a certain age?
Hi, I'm happy to be here with you today. Your question, were you born with this unusually deep voice or did it come with time? Well, of course, I was born with this voice. I didn't even realize I had, a voice until my dad saw me singing at a school musical when I was young, I guess in my early teens. And he said, "Oh, you can sing and we'll get you in the band." And then I was, quite young when I was singing in my dad's band, getting a chance to go on stage a few times with him. And so I guess the biggest difference between my voice then and now is that, of course, then I was imitating artists more often. I didn't have my own sound in the same way that I do now. I was still learning. And of course, I was also using the big part of my voice most of the time because it impressed people and because it was easier for me to sing with that big, rock voice. It was harder for me and I was more insecure when I would sing the softer stuff. And so later in my career, when I worked with producers that brought out the softer side of my voice in recordings, I started to learn and realize how much I could impact the listener and the audience by using not only the big rock voice, but also the very soft voice and the sweet voice, the high notes. And by mixing those two sides of my voice and my personality on stage, I was able to really draw a lot of emotion from people.
Born to sing. I know your father has inspired you to music and for the blues. You also sang in his band at the age of 14. But was there any specific moment in your life when you realized you were born to be a musician and a singer? And that this is exact what you want to do in your life? Did you had ever some kind of a vision about that?
Yes, my dad was definitely a big influence in my love of the blues because of his record collection and the music that he raised me listening to. And my mother also works in children's theater and she loves to sing. So, of course, they both inspired me in different ways with their love of music and their creative side. But yes, I sang with my dad's band when I was in my early teens. Once he heard me sing the first time, he said, "We've got to get you in the band." So I was only singing a couple songs with them, and then I would have to go back to the green room. It's called the backstage because in Canada, you can't be in the bar if you're underage, under a certain age. But it was a really good experience for me at the time to learn about being on stage and singing, and also going to rehearsals with my dad and his musicians. So he only did music as a hobby, but still he knew a lot about it and he was a very good musician. So I did learn a lot from that. I don't know exactly when I knew for sure that I was going to do music. That's hard to say. I was definitely long before I was in the school musicals. Excuse me. I had some moments, at festivals. I remember my parents taking me to the Vancouver Island Music Festival, or the Vancouver Folk Festival, sorry, and it was really inspiring. Seeing the musicians was just, it impacted me so deeply. And also in my teens, I was watching lots of documentaries like Monterey Pop and Woodstock, and I was very inspired by the music and also from the political activist side of the artists back then because a lot of them were saying something. They weren't just singing. They were singing about, things they felt deeply about. So that I always felt I really resonated with, and I still do today. And I still also in my albums try to touch on political issues or issues that I feel are important that are brought up through the music. I did do a blues workshop in, I believe it was 2003, And that was after being in a bar band for many years and learning a lot about what it's like to play every weekend in bars and, make little money and travel and try to get along with everyone in a band. And, I was quite young when I was doing that. I was in my early 20s. And after doing that blues workshop, some of the teachers told me that I could really, have a career in music if I wanted. And at that point, had already started thinking about getting out of the bar band because I wasn't as interested in doing cover songs anymore. I really wanted to, do original music and write my own music. And I'd already started to write songs with the guitar and perform at coffee houses. And I knew I didn't want to do the cover band for much longer. And after going to that blues workshop in 2003, I definitely knew that I wanted to take the step away from the cover band and I wanted to start making my own music and focusing only on that. And so I released my first EP in 2005 because I think of that experience at that blues workshop, and having some of those teachers who were professional musicians in Canada that were teaching at the workshop tell me, that I could do more. And I think when, you know, people in the audience say something to you, of course it means a lot, but when your peers or your colleagues say something to you, or when, people that you respect and you can see that they're doing music professionally, when they said something to me at that age, it definitely impacted me. So that might have been the point at which I really started to shift towards becoming my own artist, my own individual artist, and got away from doing cover songs and imitation as much in my music. And then also wanted to start making my own records and focus more on the songwriting.
I know your biggest music influences were Muddy Waters, Janis Joplin, and so on at a younger age. But are there any artists from the new generation of music that you find attracted to or that are inspiring for you today?
Of course, I am really a classic rock girl. I really do love the older classic rock and I love the blues. A lot of my influences are already known because they're tattooed on my body. And so Janis Joplin, of course, Muddy Waters, Bob Dylan, Tom Waits, Frank Zappa, people that were strong songwriters have always been some of my favorite artists. I also love Joni Mitchell for the songwriting and, so many more. For guitar players, Roy Buchanan, Peter Green. Uh, but when it comes to music in general, I love all kinds of music. And actually, if you look in my record collection, you can find everything from, classical to death metal. So I really like all kinds of music. I listen to all kinds of music. Um, all kinds of music inspire and influence me as an artist in my poetry, my songwriting, and my performance on stage. As far as modern or newer artists these days, there's no one specific that I can point to that's really in the popular world. Um, but as far as bands that I've discovered at festivals, I'd say some really cool artists that I've heard is Ty Segall. I really enjoy his music and Brian Jonestown Massacre. I also saw a performance, a show, and it was great. Um, yeah, there's so many. You know, I really like Chris Robinson Brotherhood, who's the original. Chris Robinson was from the Black Crowes, but he has his own band now. I really like that band a lot. And of course, Tedeschi Trucks Band is one of the greatest bands out there for blues right now. Although the band lineup has changed a lot, and my friend Kofi Burbridge unfortunately passed away and is no longer a member of that band. Um, but I love all kinds of music, so I could go on and on about my influences with modern and old music. But in general, I'm inspired by artists that I see at festivals that no one's ever heard about, and just as inspired by big artists like Van Morrison or, Janis Joplin. So
When did it start on a professional level? How old were you? And was there any specific situation or moment when making music became a profession?
I started making music on a professional level, I guess you'd say, when I actually started with the cover band. When I was living on Vancouver Island, I put an ad in the paper looking for other musicians and ended up invited into a band that already had a singer, and I was just doing some backups to begin with, and then everybody realized that I was a very strong singer, and so eventually they wanted me to be the lead singer of that band. At that time, I was performing everything from, Macy Gray to Shania Twain to Janis Joplin to AC/DC. It was a cover band, and of course, we were doing the songs that, made people happy when they would come to the bar on the weekends, made them forget their troubles and come out and have a good time and dance. So I learned a lot from that band, and I was working then with older guys that were musicians with me, and they definitely taught me a lot, especially the bass player. We became friends, and I don't think I would have continued on with that band for as long as I did if it weren't for the bass player, because there was definitely times when I was, struggling with my own life personally and other things that were happening for me. And so, when it got tough with the band, if he hadn't been there to talk me through it, then I don't know if I would have done it for as long. So you can learn a lot from the other people when you're working in the music. And I would say that at that point I was professional because I was making money with music. But as far as having my own career and being my own artist, I started making albums in 2005. I was putting out independent releases like You Will, Shades of Blue, Hoochie Coochie Woman, live at Arrington Hall. And slowly at that time, I was starting to build, a discography and performing more, and then performing my own original material. And then when I moved to Toronto and performed with Jeff Healey, things really started to take off because people started to hear my name, and I was able to do lots of festivals and gigs in Toronto and all around Ontario. And so it's hard to put an exact date. I would say, early on when I was doing the bar band, I was really considering myself a professional musician because I was doing it every weekend and, making some money doing it. But of course, things only grew from there. And once my career veered off into Europe, things really became a whole other level of professionalism with touring a lot and, winning awards and being able to make albums with record labels that I respected and perform with artists that I really respected. And so, it's just grown over time.
You took part on a lot of collaborations. Which kept in your memory the most of all and was for a certain reason special for you and interesting? Is there any story behind you could tell us?
Yes, I've collaborated on a lot of recordings, but also on stage. And I guess some of my most special memories are working with Henrik Freischlader on the album The Lily, which is one of my favorite albums that I've made in my career so far. Because that album almost didn't happen. I ended up having some major problems with my back and ended up having back surgery, and the studio time was canceled, and so was the tour that I had planned at that time. So when I came back and ended up finally making that album, I was in a very different place. I was in a really spiritual place. I was really connected to God in a lot of ways because I had gone through this really physically difficult time, and I had come out the other side of it. I had gone from not being able to walk to being able to walk again, and all of these experiences that you have when your body becomes, a burden, and you become disabled in a way. So I had made a lot of changes in my life. At that time also, I had, stopped drinking. I wasn't using any drugs. I was eating very clean, and I was taking really good care of myself. I was also singing Sunday gospel every weekend for my fans. And so I was in a place in my life when I had a different door open inside my heart and soul. And I think the songs that came out of that project with Henrik are special. And still, I look back on that album with love and affection for that time in my life. And also, of course, being on stage with Jeff Healey was definitely one of the highlights of my career. I always tell the story that, you could feel the electricity in the room when he played. There was something so special about being on stage with him. And I've been on stage with a lot of really wonderful guitar players, but that was definitely a highlight to be on stage with Jeff Healey and to hear him play and to sing with him. And also my friend Sonny Landreth, who I just love and respect so much and who I've known for many years now. and who's been a really good friend to me in the music business. He also invited me on stage several times with him, once for Rock Palast in Germany, and also at the Pier Blues Festival in Belgium when I was on stage with him and Anna Popovic. And I just loved both of those times being on stage with Sonny, because anytime you're up there with a friend, it's like a whole different feeling. And he's just such a master of the guitar and so unique in his style, and such a great person. So those are some of the special memories I have of collaborations.
How do you write songs? What is the procedure? Does the melody come first or the words? Do you play any instrument that helps you on songwriting?
Most of the songwriting I've done, in the past years has always been with someone else writing the music. And so, I've worked with producers or songwriters who would send me ideas that they would play on their instrument, or they would send me full production demos that didn't have any vocals on them, and then I would write to that music. I get inspired when I hear the music as far as what the subject matter of the lyrics and the vocal melody should be. Other times, because I also write poetry and released a poetry book last year, I, also decided to write lyrics in advance a lot of the time, and then see if there was music that would fit those words. Or maybe there was a certain subject that I want to write a song about, and so I go into listening to the demos with that idea or that thought in mind. So there's a lot of different ways and styles that I write. But when I was younger, of course, I did play guitar, just very basic guitar, and also a little bit of piano. And this helped me with songwriting. And also, some of the songs I wrote when I was younger, I just wrote a cappella, and that was just starting with a melody in my head for the vocals. And then later, someone would add instrumentation to it. So I've actually worked in all those different ways when it comes to songwriting. But the way that I write the easiest is when someone brings the music to me, and I have ideas later maybe of how it can change, or what to add to it. But when I initially hear the music, it will inspire me with the lyrics and with the subject matter of the song.
Could you tell us about your spirituality, the way you connect to the source while you create music and sing? Is there a deeper connection? Is there a need at all to connect to something like God, the universe, a higher self, or nature?
I would definitely say that when I'm on stage and I'm connecting to source, which does happen for me on stage when I'm performing, I do feel connected to something. I do feel that something bigger than me takes over. And I felt the same thing when I was stuck in bed after my back surgery, that something helped me to get out of bed and be able to walk again and be able to go forward. And, of course, I had a good surgeon, and all of those things are true. And I took really good care of myself. But I did feel that something wanted me to keep going. And whatever or whoever that is, that connection has definitely helped me at times. Also on tour, when I was so tired and hadn't slept well in so many days being on tour, that I wasn't sure if I could get on stage at all. And then I would get on stage, and that adrenaline, of course, but also that connection to something bigger than me would always pull me through, and I would be able to do a good show for people. Um, Now, because of everything that's happened since 2020, it's been a while since I've been on stage, and I am looking forward to getting back on stage just to know if I will have that same feeling or not, because I've definitely questioned some elements of the music business in the last few years, and how much ego is needed to do what we do, not only to promote our own music, but just to get on stage and to play it for people. But I think that drive inside me is still there. I mean, definitely before, when I would get on stage, it was also therapy for me. I would feel connected to something as if I was doing exactly what I was born to do, and exactly the reason I was put on this earth, to bring people into this emotional place with my voice and with my stage show. So I'm very curious to see when I get back on stage if I'll still feel that, and I'm quite sure I will. And that has definitely been hard to go without that for the last few years, that feeling. But on the other hand, it's also good to know that we are more than just ourselves as artists. We're more than just ourselves as musicians, and that there's other things that we can do well. And so I think that I had really identified with myself only as Layla Zoe for such a long time, and my music had meant absolutely everything to me, and there was really nothing else for me that I saw as important as my music. And I think the last few years has also shown me that there's other things in life that are important. And it's given me new and a healthier, maybe, perspective. And so I am grateful for, although it's been painful in the last few years to go through all of these changes in the music business, I have come out a better and stronger person in a lot of ways, I think.
I would like to talk to you about the songs I'm gonna play at the radio broadcast. If you are the songwriter, then please tell us how the song came into life. If you are not, then tell us please what was the inspiration to make your own version of the song. I have chosen 5 songs which I'm gonna play. The first one is Never Met a Man Like You from the album The Lily. Second, I Hope She Loves You Like I Do from Sleep Little Girl. Then Freedom Flowers from Jiminy. And 4 would be Workhorse from Breaking Free. And the last is Nowhere Left to Go from the same titled album.
All of the songs you mentioned are songs, of course, that I co-wrote. Most of my albums, I co-wrote all of the songs, or the majority of the songs, except some of my earlier albums I had a few cover songs on them. But as far as the songs you mentioned, I Never Met a Man Like You from the Lily album was written about actually one of my tour managers, who I started to have very strong personal feelings for, and he's still a very good friend of mine today. And he just worked so hard and was so good at what he did. And really, the tour manager is the person that keeps it all glued together. And sometimes when you're exhausted and everything's going wrong on the road, it's the tour manager that's there for you, and that fixes the problems, that defends you when you need them, that does so much hard work, and puts themselves last and puts you as the artist first. And so it's hard not to start to fall in love with some of the people that you're working with when you're on the road like that, because you're working together so closely all the time and you become like a family. So that was my kind of ode to him, and my way of saying thank you for everything that he had been doing for me and for us on the road. I Hope She Loves You Like I Do from the Sleep Little Girl album was actually originally on an album called The Fire Girl as an a cappella song. And later, Henrik Freischlader and I, when we were making Sleep Little Girl, decided to redo the song and add instrumentation. But if you get a copy or listen to my first album, The Fire Girl, or not my first album, but my album from 2009, The Fire Girl, then you can hear the original I Hope She Loves You Like I Do. And it was written by me 100%, the melody and the vocal in the a cappella version. And it was about a tattoo artist that I dated and was, in a romance with. Almost all of the songs on the Fire Girl album are about him. He and I are also still very good friends to this day. And it was about when the relationship ended and he went with someone new, that I was saying through the song that I hope she loves you as much as I did, or I do still. And so it's a personal song, but I really like the original version, and I also love what Henrik Freischlader and I did on the Sleep Little Girl album. So I hope you'll go back and get a chance to listen to both of those versions. Freedom Flowers from the Gemini album is talking about, yeah, speaking your mind. A lot of people I know made little jokes thinking that some of the lyrics in that song were about sex, because a lot of times there's innuendos in the blues about sex, like to sow my seeds, or let my freedom flowers grow. But freedom flowers grow, in that line, what I'm saying is actually to let yourself speak your mind and to speak out about the things that you feel, and of course, freedom, something that we all have had to look at closely in the last few years, especially. is something that everyone is entitled to. And yet we see around the world that a lot of people aren't experiencing it. So it's about sowing the seeds of freedom, but also about speaking and letting those seeds grow into flowers by speaking out about what you really believe and what you feel and what you know is right and what you know is wrong. Workhorse from the Breaking Free album, which was released on Roof Records, is actually a really funny song, and it was written for the owner of my record label at the time, Thomas Roof of Roof Records. He knows that, and he was quite flattered when he heard that I wrote the song about him. But I was, inspired by him and the relationship, because we were just working so hard when I was doing the Blues Caravan. We had more shows than I was used to having. We were traveling all over, and I was busier than I'd ever been on the road when I was working with his label. And so, of course, at moments it felt like we were like workhorses, like we were just slaves to his vision of the music. And of course, there's positive and negative things to working with any record label, but definitely at that time, because Thomas is a businessman, it felt, at moments that I was having to sacrifice my artistic vision, and was just kind of being flogged like this workhorse of the blues. But you can also hear through the song that there's obviously things about it I enjoy, because it was wonderful to travel to America and tour all over the United States thanks to Roof Records, and there was so many wonderful opportunities at the same time. And I think that it's always bittersweet when you're traveling a lot and on the road, because it's painful, it's exhausting, you miss your family and friends, you miss having one place to sleep every night. And on the other side, you just love the music and you love the experiences and you love the other artists you meet on the road. And like I said, you become family with the people you're traveling and touring with. So there's just wonderful things about it too. But that's what the song's about. Being a workhorse in the blues. The last song you asked about, Nowhere Left to Go, is from the album Nowhere Left to Go, which is a really special album because it was made, in 2020, when it was very difficult, obviously, for anyone to get together in the studio and make the recordings together. And so all of the musicians recorded from home. And that was the first time I did a project like that, where I was integral in keeping everything together and letting people know what I wanted for the recordings, and also did the songwriting only using the computer and in contact with the songwriters. Only through the computer everything was done, and then we all recorded, yeah, from either home studios or from studios where we were living, and then the music was brought together, and I produced that album, so it was special to me. I learned a lot from the making of that record. That particular song is about what the people of Australia experienced in 2019, 2020 with the forest fires that devastated parts of Australia and killed a lot of the wildlife. Since I was a small child, I always wanted to go to Australia, and I really hope someday I'll be able to sing and perform there. That I'll find a way to visit there finally, because it's just been a dream of mine since I was a child. And so when I saw the images on the news of the fires and what was happening, it was just so painful to see. I also obviously have experienced in Canada that there's been a lot of fires, and that as we notice the temperatures rising each summer, that it causes a lot of problems in areas that have like large, massive, areas of wilderness, and so in Canada also we've experienced a lot of devastating forest fires, but in Australia it was definitely something at the time that was so shocking and upsetting that I had to write a song for the people of Australia, and it ended up being the single and the title track of the album.
Tell us something about your life that you live now. You are married? Where do you live? As far as I know, you left Canada in 2013.
I currently live in the Netherlands with my husband. He's Dutch. I met him when I was living in Germany years ago, and that's a great story. I was with my agent at a concert of an artist named Ryan Bingham, and I was kind of feeling a bit claustrophobic in the audience. It was a small venue in Cologne, Germany, and I was crowded in with all the people, and I didn't like the feeling, so I went to the back of the room. At that time, I still smoked cigarettes, so I walked out to have a cigarette and he followed me out there and we started talking. And little did I know that years later we would be husband and wife. So I ended up living in Germany, obviously, because I was touring so much in Europe and also because my record label was in Germany. And so there was a lot of reasons I moved from Canada to Germany. But the reason I moved from Germany to Holland was because of love and, because of my husband. We got married in 2020. We've been together for, yeah, almost 8 years now. And we have two small dogs, which we brought into our lives in 2020 also, which I'm so grateful for both of them. One of them is named Leo. There's a song I wrote about him called This Love Will Last on the Nowhere Left to Go record. And coming up on the new album, which will be released at the end of August, is a song called Jasmine about my other dog. And I just love them both. They're like my children. And I'm very grateful for that feeling of stability and love that I receive from my husband and my dogs and my life in Holland. But of course, I feel torn a lot of the time and really miss my family and friends in Canada. And so I try to visit as much as I can. In the last few years, it hasn't been possible. And so I'm hoping I'll be able to get back to Canada in the fall and see them all. I think that we all have to make sacrifices sometimes for our art, sacrifices for love, sacrifices for our work. And so it's definitely been the case with my music that there's been times when I had to move and move and move again and be away from those that I loved, or just when I would start to make connections with people, I would move again. But I found some way to be happy with myself and where I am in the moment, and that's never been truly easy for me as the personality type that I am. But I think as musicians, we learn to adapt, and we have to adapt to a different hotel room, to a different stage, to a different sound man, to a different culture every night when we're on the road. And so I've learned how to adapt and try to make the best of my situation and look at what I do have and not at what I don't have.
So there is a new album coming up. What can you tell us about it? Are there any collaborations? Where was it recorded? How many songs? And what can we expect?
My new album titled The World Could Change will be released at the end of August, on August 26th, as long as everything goes as planned. There are many collaborations because the entire album is co-written again with Henrik Freischlader, the owner of the record label Cable Car Records. We also worked together in collaboration on the albums The Lily, Sleep Little Girl, and also he produced the Live at Spirit of 66 double live album that I released when I was on the label. So we work very well together. I think we wrote some wonderful songs. I was able to talk about a lot of subjects that I had been on my mind over the past few years, and I think it's a special record. So I'm really excited to see how the fans react. Of course, I'm speaking on political issues. I'm speaking on love. I'm speaking on, you know, yeah, so many things, as I always try to with my albums, be diverse in the songwriting and in the lyrical content. So you'll hear, again, the format of like a 4 or 5 piece band, guitar, bass, and drums with organ, occasionally on some of the songs and vocals. And it was produced by Henrik Freischlader. And it was time for me to take a break again from producing myself and, releasing albums on my own label because, of course, a lot goes into doing the crowdfunding that I was using to be able to release those albums. And it's a lot of work. And so it was time to hand it over to a record label again, especially because with Henrik, I know that he also wants the best quality music and he wants the songs to be the best they can be. And he gives me a lot of freedom as an artist to express myself, and he brings out the best, I think, in my voice in the studio. So I was really happy to work with him again and to come together with him again at this time because, I think that this is a project that I really needed to make. And so I was really grateful that we could make it together. And so I look forward to see what the reaction is from the fans and from the music listeners out there.
So we are waiting for it. There's an upcoming tour as well, mostly in Germany, as I saw on your webpage in 2023. Well, to promote the new album, tell us something about it.
Well, the reality of the tour that you're referring to that is mostly in Germany in 2023 is that it is some of the dates that were canceled in 2020 that have been moved forward all the way to 2023, because each year it looked like it might be possible to tour again. Of course, it was not. And in the last year, I moved the shows again to 2023 because the situation was still bad at the time when I made that decision. Now things have opened up a lot and things are a lot easier, and musicians are able to do their jobs again. And audiences are able to come out to the venues without being asked to do testing or to show QR codes or vaccine passports in most countries. And so now things are better, but at the time I just didn't feel that I could go along with some of what was being asked of myself as an artist or of my audience and my fans. So, I moved the tour again to 2023, and I really hope that everything will continue on the path it is, that we'll all be able to get together in freedom and in solidarity in the venues in Germany and also Belgium, Hungary, Bratislava. There's a lot of different gigs, Austria. There's a lot of different shows on the tour in 2023. It's not solely only in Germany. But of course, I'll be performing a mix of songs. I think that I will be performing stuff from the new album, The World Could Change, but also from the album Nowhere Left to Go, because I never got a chance to tour that album. So there'll be some songs from the recent records. And of course, I always like to pull a few songs from the older albums into the set list, and then, maybe even a few cover songs if there's something that I really feel strongly that I want to sing. I'm really looking forward to that tour. I'm working on putting together musicians now, but again, it's still not, it's still a long ways off. So I've got time to think about what I'd really like to do. And I just hope, with the gas prices rising and with everything that's going on, that it will be possible to tour and that it will still make sense. People need to remember, of course, that musicians are out there under completely different circumstances than they were before, trying to do their jobs, trying to still make a living. And so, I hope that people will not be afraid and will go out to those shows and support live music in every way that they can, so we can get it back on track, because certainly it's been, a devastating few years for many musicians and for the music business, particularly in countries like Germany. And so let's see what we can do. And I think new music always helps. So I'm, excited to release the new album and then take the show on tour in the spring of 2023.
So we are looking forward to see you and meet you on stage and for the new album, of course. Thank you so much for your time and talking to me. This was Amiya for Radio Cultura, the female power of the blues. My guest was Layla Zoe.
It's been great talking with you. Thank you so much for having me on the show. And I wish you all out there love, healing, forgiveness, and music. Keep the blues alive. Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. This is Layla Zoe, Canada's darling of the blues, and you're listening to Radio Cultura.